is a same side granny square worked without a color change. Working a same side granny square without a color change means there's no bind offs. You just keep working in rounds until the square is as big as you want it. Now, because we're not binding off and starting fresh in a corner each round like we did for the first tutorial, we have to begin our corners a little differently. Instead of starting just with half of a corner, one granny cluster, working our way around and then finishing it up on the other end, we actually have to begin with a full corner. If we don't do that, every time we join, it's going to join here. The next round, it's going to be on a side. The next round, it's going to be, depending on what round you're on, another side, and then to the corner again. And it kind of leaves a pinwheel join, because every join is done one granny cluster further than it was the previous round. Whereas if you build a full corner to begin, every time you come around, you're going to be joining in the same spot. And then that keeps all your joins on the same corner and on the same diagonal. Let's get started and you'll see what I'm talking about. So again, you can, if you saw the first video, you can begin with a chain 4 and slip stitch to the first chain to begin your inner circle. I'm just going to begin with a magic circle here. Again, that is up to you to use what option you prefer best. Also in the first video, I showed you how to chain 2 instead of 3 and then joining each round in the middle double crochet of the granny cluster to add the rest of the height to this chain. If you're not sure what I'm referring to, go ahead and go back and watch the first video and you will see how I start and end the rounds by chaining 2 at the beginning. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to get right into it. All right, so we know that a granny square has 4 sides. And each side on this first round is represented by one granny cluster. The corners are going to be represented by 2 chains. So I have a side and a corner created so far. We need 4 sides because we are making a square. There's my second side. I'm going to make my second corner. That's my third side. I'm going to make another corner by chaining 2. And the granny cluster is made up of 3 double crochets. So one granny cluster is 3 double crochets. There we go. So right now, if you look at what I have a granny cluster to begin with over here. My initial chain 2 counts as a double crochet, so I have 3 double crochets in that first cluster. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, but only have 1, 2, 3 corners. So I need to work 2 more chains to create my 4th corner. And because I'm beginning with a magic circle, I'm going to pull that tight. And here is where, if you begin with a chain 2, you will join in the middle double crochet of your original starting cluster. So here is my chain 2, here's the middle cluster, and here's the middle double crochet, and here's the 3rd double crochet. So I want to join this round by inserting my hook under the head of that middle double crochet of that cluster and doing a slip stitch to join. When I do that, the second loop on the hook falls over, adding the height I need to that chain 2, bringing it to the height of the double crochets on each side of it. Again, all of this is explained more fully in the first video. If you're kind of lost and scratching your head, feel free to go back and watch that first, and then come back and you can see, pick up where you left off. All right, so now as you see, we have joined and we're kind of stuck in the middle of this granny cluster here. If we were changing colors on every round, we would bind off, choose a corner, and start fresh every single round. So we don't really have to think about moving our yarn over or moving our hook over to a corner to get started. If you're working a same side granny in one color and not binding off on every round, you've got to move your hook over to the next corner. And the way that we get our hook over here is to slip stitch into the third double crochet of that cluster, and then we slip stitch into the chain 2 corner. And now we are at a fresh corner to begin our next round. So now if you remember from the first video of the working a traditional same side granny, we began each round with only half a corner. So we would work one granny cluster into this corner, then chain 1 and go all the way around. And when we got back to the other side, we would do the second cluster into this chain 2 space corner with our chain 2 and slip stitch to join. However, the caveat to this method is that because we're having to slip stitch across to get to the next chain 1 space or the next corner to continue building the round, you're going to end up every round is going to join one granny cluster over. So your joins are going to be kind of diagonal, going like this. So if you want all of your joins to be in a corner instead of down the side and then around, as the square is building, what you need to do to start is to go ahead and build your entire corner, your starting corner. So instead of beginning just with one granny cluster and finishing up on the other side of the round, go ahead and start with a full corner being worked as so. Okay, so let's go ahead and take it on around. So we chain 1 to jump this granny cluster, and we work another corner, which is a granny cluster, and a chain 2 granny cluster. The yarn is getting tight. There we go. And there's my second corner. Now we're going to chain 1 to jump this side, just like we did in the original part 1 video. Nothing has changed there. We chain 1 for the sides, we chain 2 for the corners. And remember that there are so many different ways to do a granny square. Some people chain 2 on the sides and chain 3 in the corners. I would just suggest playing around with it to see how your tension is. For me, chaining 3 in the corners leaves like it's too much slack. And so that's why I chain 2 instead of 3. What you don't want to do is go less than 2 chains in a corner, because then your corners will end up rounded. It's not enough real estate to make that a right angle corner if you only chain one. Now, there are some granny square patterns where there is no chain in the corner because it's filled completely with stitches. So if I was to replace these two chains with another double, then I would still end up with a right angle corner. But that is another whole video that hopefully will be coming to you soon. All right. And now I'm back to my original corner. I need to jump this granny square, or excuse me, this granny cluster right here. So I'm going to chain one. And because I started with a chain two here, I will insert my hook under the head of the middle double crochet of that cluster and work a slip stitch, which closes that round. And there is round two. Okay. So let's do another round. Because I'm kind of hanging out here in the middle of this cluster, again, I have to move my hook, my yarn, over to this corner to build a new corner to start the new round. I do that by slip stitching to the third double crochet in that cluster, and I slip stitch into the chain two space corner of the previous round. Now I'm ready to begin my new round. I chain two. I build my first granny cluster. I chain two for the corner. You can kind of give this a little tug and scoot it over so you can work your second granny cluster into this corner. And there you are, ready to go. Keep on going around and I will meet you at the end of this round. Don't forget, chain one to jump all the previous round's granny clusters and work a side cluster in the chain one spaces now that they're available. And I will meet you back at the end of this round. And so here we are at the end of the round. I have to jump my last granny cluster of the previous round, so I chain one. Here is my chain two. Here is my middle double crochet of the granny cluster. I insert my hook under the head for a slip stitch and join. And there you have it. That is a same side granny square, sans changing colors. And so you can see the little nuances that depending on how you begin and end or whether you're turning your work or not, there are certain little things that you'll need to do to get your granny square to come out the way that you want it.